This is Lesson 5. Within this chapter, you've seen how easy it is to create animation in Flash using motion twins. We can simply take an object, move it from point A to point B, and Flash pretty much handles the rest for us. Sometimes the drawback to this, as you may have noticed, is that Flash generally takes the quickest path possible, and it pretty much creates a linear path going from point A to point B, meaning everything just moves in a straight line. Now we can get somewhat creative like we have in this animation by moving the object to different places along the tween span, so it appears to take sort of an unusual path. But again, what if we want to do something far more complex, like we want an object to animate along the edge of a piece of type, or we want it to follow a roller coaster-like path across the stage? These are things that are far more difficult to accomplish if we're trying to keyframe that sort of animation. For cases like this, what we're going to do instead is we're going to create what's known as a motion guide. If you've worked with previous versions of Flash, such as CS4 or even CS3 and earlier, you've probably already used motion guides at some point. But what's nice is in the last couple of versions of Flash, starting with CS4, creating motion guides has been a lot more intuitive and a lot easier to do. We simply take basic drawing tools, we draw the path that we'd like, and we apply it to any animation that's already active on the stage. So let's see how it's done. We're going to start off with opening the fl05_video.fla lesson file. And if we take a look at this, we'll see that this file is very similar to the files used throughout the written exercises in the chapter, with a few slight modifications to make it a bit more basic. If we press the enter or return key, we'll see that the airplane and its shadow move from the right edge of the stage to the left edge. Now, the path that they're following is pretty basic. It's just a straight line up and a straight line down. But I may want my plane to do something a little crazier, in which case I'm going to have to create a motion guide that is a little bit out of the ordinary and probably too difficult to do if I was doing it frame by frame or keyframing it just by moving the plane around. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to use a basic drawing tool such as the pencil tool. We're going to draw the exact path that we want our plane to follow and then make it happen. First thing we're going to need to do is, since we can't draw directly on tween layers once they've been created, we're going to need to create sort of a scratch layer that we can work with and then eventually move it to the tween layer itself. So first, we're going to go down to the timeline panel and we're going to click the new layer icon to create a new layer right above the airplane layer here. And again, it's unimportant what we name this layer or where it really ends up in the layer stack because it's basically just for scratch. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go over to the right side of our workspace and we're going to select the pencil tool. On the property inspector, make sure that the pencil tool has a stroke. In this case, just a black stroke is fine and no fill. Leave the stroke set to 1 point or 1 pixel. And what we're going to do before we start is we're going to go down to the bottom of the tools panel here. And we want to make sure our object drawing icon is actually popped out. So this is what it looks like in, and we're going to make sure that object drawing mode is disabled. This will actually give us a little bit more flexibility when it comes to manipulating this line if we need to later. What we're also going to do is directly below, under pencil mode, we're going to click and we're going to choose smooth because we want to draw a curvy path. And this will make sure that as we draw, it tries to smooth out the line for us. Before we start drawing on our new layer, what we're going to do is we're just going to click on the timeline ruler to bring the playhead back to frame 1. This way we at least have an idea of where the plane starts and we can start drawing right from that point. So with my pencil tool, I'm going to click right about where the airplane starts and I'm going to drag to the left. And I'm going to draw a fairly crazy roller coaster-like path here. Wouldn't want to be on this airplane, right? And we're going to continue dragging and drawing over to the left. And I'm just going to leave this off so it hangs a bit off the left edge of the stage like that. So right now, this is just a pencil path. Just a basic vector path, but we're going to make this something more in just a moment. So what we're going to do is let's go ahead and press the V key, and this will change us to our selection tool. You can also take the long way and just select that tool from the top of the tools panel, but the V key is a nice shortcut, especially if you're already on the left side of the workspace. And using my selection tool, I'm going to double click on the path so the entire thing is selected just like this. And what we're going to do is we're going to choose Command X or Control X if you're on Windows, and we're going to cut the path right off of the layer and put it on the clipboard. What we're also going to do is we're going to select the airplane layer directly below on the timeline panel. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the line that we just cut and we're going to paste it in the exact same place but on this tween layer. And what that's going to do is it's actually going to turn that vector path into a motion path or motion guide. To do this, go ahead and hold down Shift Command V or Shift Control V and paste it. And what you'll see happens is the motion path that was originally created when we created our tween is replaced with the vector path that we created a moment ago. Go ahead and press the Enter or Return key, and what you'll see is the plane follows the path, but what's kind of an interesting side effect of this is that it tends to follow the path from left to right, so it actually reverses our animation, and that's kind of a nasty side effect, but it's really easy to fix. So to do that, we're going to go down to our timeline panel, and I'm going to right-click on the tween span, or control-click if we're on Mac, and from the contextual menu that pops up toward the bottom, I'm just simply going to choose Reverse Keyframes. So now if we press Enter or Return again, we'll see that the plane goes back to the right to left animation it was supposed to do originally. So this is pretty cool. We've taken something that we created ourselves with a basic drawing tool, and we've turned it into an animation path. Now keep in mind, you can do this with anything that creates vector paths. We can even do it with the type tool if we convert that type to an outline first. So there's a lot of really creative things we can do here. So the nice thing is that motion guides or motion paths are basically just paths, vector paths. And we can copy and paste those even from an existing tween layer. So let's take a look. We'll see if we press Enter or Return again that our shadow is not exactly mimicking what our airplane is doing. It's still following its original motion path. And it's a separate animation, so we would expect that to happen. But now that I've adjusted the trajectory of the airplane, I'm going to want to do the same with the shadow directly below it. Now, we've already removed our original vector path from that scratch layer, so it's gone for good. But what we can do is we can actually copy the motion path from one tween and paste it to another. So I can take this new motion path I've created and I can just carry that over to the shadow layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply click on that path just like this, and I'm going to press Command C or Control C to copy it. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over and select the shadow layer in the timeline panel. And I'm going to paste this motion path that I've copied just like I did before, by holding down Shift, Command V, or Shift, Control V. And what you'll see happens now, so if we press Enter or Return, it also now follows that path. But again, we have sort of the same problem we had before, which is it actually reverses the direction of the animation. So once again, I'm going to make that same correction. To do that, we're going to go over to the Shadow Motion Tween layer, Control-click or right-click on it, and once again choose Reverse Keyframes. If we press Enter or Return once more, we'll see the two go together in perfect harmony, except it's a little too perfect because our shadow is actually supposed to be on the ground. Now, even though it looks like these are both following the same motion path, it just so happens that the motion path is in the same place and they overlap each other, but each one still does have its own individual motion path, which right now is virtually the same thing. So what I'd like to do is actually flip the shadow's motion path upside down while keeping the original shape, and we can do this because, again, it's just a vector path. So what I'm going to do is over in the timeline panel, I'm going to lock the airplane tween layer, and temporarily I'm going to hide it, just so I'm only looking at the shadow itself, and I don't accidentally select anything on the airplane layer. And for the shadow, I'm going to go ahead and use my selection tool, and I'm going to click and select its motion path. Now, what's cool is that motion paths, because they're vector paths, can be transformed or manipulated pretty much like you would with any other shape or any other path. So what I'm going to do here is with this path selected, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select the Free Transform tool over on the Tools panel on the right. And so this gives me a bounding box around that motion path. And now what I can simply do is I can take this and I can carefully flip it upside down just like that. So what I've done is I've taken the motion path that's already been applied to that tween layer, but I've used basic tools to manipulate it. In this case, I've transformed it or flipped it upside down just like I would with any other piece of artwork. And the best part is that the shadow remains married to its motion path. So I was able to tweak that motion path a bit without breaking the tween itself. So now what we're going to do is we're going to press the V key to return to our selection tool and to exit that free transform. I'm going to unhide the airplane layer, and I'm going to press the return key and watch the two animate. So this is a little bit closer to what I want, and I've gotten a much better result. So now the airplane and its shadow are still reflecting off of each other, just like this. And they're both using this new motion path I've created. Now you can further fine-tune this any which way you want. In this case, I may decide to take the shadow's motion path, click it, and move the whole tween down so the airplane and its shadow never actually overlap each other. And the end result is this. So what we've learned here is that we can create custom motion guides just by using basic drawing tools. We can apply those motion guides simply by pasting them to existing tween layers. And the best part about motion paths and motion guides in general, with the new animation engine that was introduced in Flash CS4 and of course is now present in Flash CS5, is that we can treat those motion paths or motion guides just like any other vector path or piece of artwork. We can transform them, we can manipulate them, and we can even use them to move an entire tween in one shot.